Hi, and welcome to Town Talk. I'm Eric Lewis.
And I'm Andrew LeBlanc.
This is our 4th episode. Thanks so much for joining us again. Just as a reminder, this show is not affiliated with or endorsed by the town of Riverview. It's just two old friends chatting about municipal issues.
Two young friends.
That's what I meant to say. Two young friends. Absolutely. Today, we want to do something a little bit different. In the last couple of episodes, we've talked about major projects in the town or issues that are sort of current, but we wanted to talk tonight a bit about the role of council. It's a broad topic, lots of ways we can go with it, but just talking broad strokes about what council is and what it does. So let's start with you. This is your 9th year on Riverview Council, thanks to COVID. This year's obviously the elections in May were delayed until May of next year, just to allow to push the election off. So. What inspired you to sort of pursue a seat on council 9 years ago?
Well, I've always really been involved in the community. I spent my whole career in the nonprofit sector, working with children and youth and trying to make a difference in my community. I've also really been interested in leadership positions and in government. I studied political science a little bit when I was in university. It was in student government in high school, student union in university, and I just really like to be involved and like to find a way to make my community better. So that kind of fed that passion. And so, we were approaching municipal election time and as we were leading into 2012, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to marry my passion for community engagement with my passion for government as well. And here we are. I made the decision. A funny story, actually. My wife and I started dating in June of 2011, and I think it was maybe 4 months later, I informed her that I was going to be running for municipal government, and our entire relationship has involved me either running in a campaign or being on council. So,
yep,
politics is very much a part of my life at this point.
So it's been 9 years now. What has that journey been like for you? You've been through 2 election campaigns. What's the whole sort of 9 years been like?
Well, it's been an incredible experience. And for anybody who's ever thought about getting involved, municipal government is a really cool way to get involved in the community and try and make a difference. So I would certainly encourage anyone thinking about it to run in May. And it's a really cool experience. So, coming in 2012, there was 5 of us that were new on council. So there was a lot of learning involved. It takes some time to get your feet wet, get used to how does this whole beast even work? What's the relationship between council and staff? How do the policies look? What do the bylaws look like? What's our role in implementing all of these things? So it can take a year or two to really get comfortable with the process and how it works. Even having been a pretty strong observer of how government works leading into me running, it's still a pretty big eye-opener once you get elected and start to really realize what the process is. So it was a great learning opportunity. And then coming into my second term, obviously I had 4 years under my belt. And so it was a really a great transition with some new team members coming in. And we were able to hit the ground running and take on some big projects. I think we've taken on a number of really big issues, and I'm really pleased with the things we've been able to accomplish. And so at the end of the day, it's really all about connecting with residents, making sure that you're aware and informed about what issues are priorities for residents, and then making sure you're making votes that are in the best interest of the town. So we have to think about the future. I think that's something that oftentimes gets overlooked when you talk about municipal government. A lot of times we focus on right here, right now. What's the new big building that we're going to build, or this street right now? And those things are really important. But the other thing that a municipal government has to do is look to the future. And that's why we have things like the 10-year capital plan. We have to be positioning our town for growth for years down the road to make sure that we remain sustainable. We've built an appropriate infrastructure to handle growth, to handle changes, to be able to adapt, as needed. And that's a real big part of what we do, is that strategic planning, setting that vision and trying to figure out how do we manage things moving forward. And it doesn't always result in some real tangible items up front that you can point to and say, yep, I did that and I did that. Sometimes it's, here's the strategic plan, and isn't this a wonderful document, and it lays out a great vision. Sometimes those are the really crucial things that a municipal government has to take on.
let's talk a bit about that. So I think most people understand what a municipal council does, but there's sometimes a bit of confusion perhaps about what the different levels of government do. Municipally, there's provincial government, obviously, and the federal government and their role. And certainly municipal government is really grassroots. You can run into constituents every day at the grocery store. So what is the municipal council's role, as compared to the provincial and federal governments when it comes to Riverview?
Sure. So in terms of the different sorts of things that we do, obviously, like setting the tax rate, that's something that a municipal government is responsible for. Local economic development, municipal governments handle those. Service deliveries. So our Parks and Recreation Department, for example, do an incredible job of service delivery in this town. So whether they're, building new playgrounds or Mill Creek Nature Park or running programming for seniors or for youth, there's so many things that happen. We're sort of charged with protecting that community feel, that small town. I think we talked about this in the first episode too, right? Protecting that small town feel that we have, and facilitating opportunities for residents to engage with each other, to connect, to be a part of festivals together, to celebrate together and do those sorts of things. And those are really important if we're going to build the kind of atmosphere and culture that we want in town. So those are just some of the things, I guess, that we have to take on.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned roads as a tangible thing that people can see, that they know their council made the decision to get that road fixed up or whatever had to be done. What are some of the other tangible things people should expect of their councils?
Sure. To preface this, I mean, there's so many things that municipal councils do, and if there was another councillor sitting here, they might choose to highlight different things. And so this is really, really top level. But like you said, roads and infrastructure, that's a really big one. Actually, we did a survey of residents a couple of years ago, and street repair and roads are the number one priority that residents are telling us that they want us to be looking into. So that's an interesting bit of information in terms of setting your priorities, which is one of the other things that municipal government is supposed to do. So the strategic plan for the town, that's a process that's driven by council. It's built by staff and council working together to come up with priorities based on the needs and the wants of residents, what we need to look at moving forward. And so in that, we develop our 10-year capital plan, which outlines all the major expenditures over the next 10 years. We're responsible to build the budget every year. So we're going to outline all of the key expenses. How much are we going to put into street patching? How much are we going to put into economic development and programming and things like that? And
you're just getting into that process for 2021.
We are, yeah. It is budget season, and so those deliberations are going to start. We're filming on a Wednesday, so it'll be next week that we have our first day of deliberations on the budget. And residents can watch that online right now because it's COVID, so you have to watch online, but you can certainly view all of those deliberations. So that's a big piece of what we do, setting the strategic plan, the vision, the budget. But really the analogy I like to use, you asked about specific services. So writing bylaws and approving bylaws, we're responsible to doing that. If somebody wants to come and build something in the town and they need some rezoning to do that, town council has to approve any rezoning application that comes in. I mentioned earlier about the tax rate. In my mind, a municipal government is also responsible to try and grow the tax base. The more the tax base can grow, the more, the more we can keep the tax rate low, which is what we want. We would rather grow the base than the rate. We invest in communities. Through our budgeting, we have a community investment process. So, we invest with local nonprofit organizations like the Boys and Girls Club, the Riverview Arts Center, Capitol Theater, different grants for, the food bank, the Sea Cadets, all of those things. In my mind, it's not just, giving money to community organizations. We're making an investment with groups who are helping us execute our strategic plan and building a really strong community, and keeping us sustainable and helping work towards some of those strategic pillars that we've laid out. So I think the best analogy for how and it's not exactly the same, it's not bulletproof, but I think a good analogy for it is we're kind of like a board of directors for an organization. We set the policy and we set the parameters and the vision for how we want the town to move, and then the staff take all of that, and it's their job to execute, their job to offer the services, their job to work on street repair and build new projects and things like that within the parameters that we set as a council. And so it takes both of us working together. It takes a lot of teamwork, and I think that's one of the strengths of Riverview in general. And I know I can't speak for everybody, but I think everybody would agree with me on this one, that we do operate as a really good team in Riverview. I always say we're really good at disagreeing with one another. So when we get into council chambers, we absolutely have heated conversations. We disagree with each other. And I think the key to our success, or any municipal government success, is to have a mutual respect for the fact that you and I might not agree, but you were given your chair by the residents just like I was given my chair by the residents. And so I have to respect your opinion because the residents respect your opinion, and they wanted you to sit there and voice that opinion. So you win some votes, you lose some votes. You got to be a team, and you gotta work towards the same vision. And so you advocate for what you believe in. Sometimes you lose, and you just have to respect the process because that's democracy.
Right.
And I think we've done a really good job of doing that, and we've been able to work really well. Our team right now is awesome. So.
You mentioned something about engaging residents to get a sense of what they want. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this year, at least since March, has really there aren't public events where you're going to go see. There are no block parties where you're going to meet 50 or 100 or whatever residents, even if it's a passing greeting or a lengthy conversation. So, as a counselor, how has that impacted your role this year?
It's tough. I mean, like I said earlier, that grassroots style of government is one of the things that really attracted me to municipal politics. So not being able to engage with residents as frequently is certainly a challenge. I mean, you want to be able to connect, you want to be able to talk, and you want to know what issues are important to residents. And so we come up with things like this in order to try and get information out there and to inform residents when we can. And, obviously we have to use social media a little bit more than we did in the past. It's incumbent on us to revisit any of our communication strategies to make sure that just because we're in a pandemic doesn't negate the fact that we have a responsibility to communicate with residents. So you got to adapt and you have to pivot. And so it may have been a challenge, but here we are trying to do what we can. And really, I mean, I'm so fortunate to be able to serve as deputy mayor for this year. I want to do whatever I can with that position. I don't want to just let it roll by for a year and be like, well, we were in a pandemic, I couldn't do anything. So I have a responsibility to connect with residents, and thanks for helping with that. So we can do that. So, but I think maybe that's a good lead into, because I have some questions for you too. So we talked about how I got involved in things, but you've obviously had a real passion for this community, and in particular for local government and the direction the town's moving in. So how did you build that passion for Riverview?
Sure. So, yeah, I grew up here. My parents still live in the same house in Bridgedale they've lived in my whole life. My grandparents were 4 houses away. And I don't know exactly when it started, but I believe it started with my grandmother, Tressa Lewis. For those who have been around town for a long time, you may know the name. She was on council for about 15 years. She was deputy mayor at one point. And my memories of some of this are vague, but I know I spent a lot of time sitting around her kitchen table when I was a kid. Again, they were 4 houses away, so babysitter was right there. But I remember her getting calls from residents. Mm-hmm. I remember that phone ringing, and it was a resident, or it might have been the mayor or a fellow councilor or a staff member, and she was dealing with that stuff, day to day. And I was, I didn't retain a ton of it, but I was aware of it. And during the election campaigns, I do quite vividly remember this, the signs that said Tressa Lewis Cares, or TLC, which in my 5 and 8 and 10-year-old brain kind of meant to me like my grandmother was like this queen of Riverview or something, like this super important person.
I think a lot of people would share that opinion too.
Well,
So.
I hope so. I hope so. She was a tough nut, and you know, but I know she had a lot of passion for the town, and as I got older, and a little more interested, I had a bit of knowledge just from her. We would talk about those things. And then as an adult, I was a reporter here in the Moncton area for 14 years, roughly. And at some point in that time frame, the newsroom I worked in was shuffling roles around. And I said, if you're shuffling people around, could I have the Riverview beat? I live there. I've lived there my whole life. I'd love to be the guy writing about things happening in town. So I was able to do that for probably 4 or maybe even up to 5 or 6 years. And I loved it. There wasn't a ton of media attention on the town. So I really enjoyed having that role and being able to be sort of that conduit to let people know what was going on. As you know, council chambers are never that packed. So it was usually me and a former councillor, I believe, but I really had a passion for writing about it. So I think that's where it started with my grandmother. And then in my professional life, when I was a journalist, I just really enjoyed being sort of that conduit of information and doing my best to tell my fellow residents what was going on. So it was a fun gig, and it was just neat kind of being that conduit, I guess.
I think it's interesting because with some municipal issues, like, it's never as simple as people think it is. Like, there's always multiple sides. And so I think your experience has allowed you to see different perspectives on, oh, well, this is why the town might do this, or this is why they do that. But it also would give you a different perspective as to what do you expect from your elected officials. And every resident probably has a different answer to this question. What do you expect from your municipal elected officials?
That's a tough one, because I know it's a demanding job. But off the top, like, I think obviously managing our tax dollars is critical. You know, we're all paying property taxes, and putting those to good use to make sure we have, you know, decent roads to drive on and decent infrastructure underneath those roads, and services like, you know, for instance, you mentioned Parks and Rec earlier. Like, they do a phenomenal job. There's programming. My daughter's been in a few of the programs. I'm aware of that. The park system and the growing trail system, those investments, I think those are really important for our community. Trying to grow the community both residentially and commercially. We all want sort of everything nearby. You know, we don't want to have to drive elsewhere to get something, but you want to grow that in a reasonable and kind of responsible way. So those are sort of top of mind for me, but I think also retaining that sort of positive community spirit through events, through you know, through the investments that are made. That's sort of, those are the things that are top of mind for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. And I think, you know, we could have a different counselor and a different resident sitting in these chairs and have completely different answers to all of these questions.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I think today was about having a really high level overview of some of the things that a municipal council does. We could talk for hours about the different intricacies that go into how the government operates and how we go about decision making and all of those things. But hopefully we were able to cover you know, a little bit of detail for you today. Hopefully we were able to give you a little bit more of an insight as to at least what the priorities are for me, and how we go about operating as a municipal government.
Yeah, and we also wanted to give a bit of insight into our backgrounds, just so you could kind of see why we wanted to do this show, what our interests are, and sort of where we're coming from.
Yeah.
So that was our 4th episode. Thanks so much for joining us.
And again, we really like to hear from you. So if there are issues and topics you'd like us to cover, the contact information will be up on the screen. And please send us a message and let us know what you'd like to hear about. So thanks again for watching Town Talk.